Okay, fun seekers. Oh boy, do we have a treat for you. All right. We are going to slog through the various expenses that come with mutual funds. And it is indeed a slog. So we want you to have some paper to write some notes and get out that study guide because we're going to ask you to remember these and learn these and internalize these different ways that mutual fund investors are charged. I mean, investors know, most people know that they're not getting it for free. They understand that there are expenses, but not everybody really understands how the expenses are being charged to them, and so they sort of just wave their hands around and go, "Yeah, I know, I'm getting charged." But you, dear students, are going to be the investment gurus for your friends, family, your colleagues, and maybe for you'll be a professional. So you have to understand this cold, so that if we called you up at 2 o'clock in the morning and asked you to explain the difference between the Class A and the Class B shares and the C shares and the F shares, you could do it. Now, don't worry, no one's going to call you up at 2 o'clock in the morning. At least I'm not. So let's get started on slide 21. All mutual funds have what are called annual operating expenses. Excuse me. Annual operating expenses. Let me get a drink of water. My apologies. Well, actually, that's not true anymore. As we mentioned in the previous presentation, there's a company called Fidelity. They've been around for many decades that actually offers, I think, 3 mutual funds with no expenses. It's called Loss Leader. Get them in the door, give them some for free, and then sell them something later on. But out of the 12,000, there's only a few. Maybe there'll be a few more as competition heats up. But all mutual funds will have operating expenses. And the 3 operating expenses that you will normally see are the management fees, the 12B1 fees. What is that? And then accounting and other expenses. By far, the largest one is the management fees. That's the money that is paid to the portfolio managers and analysts who make the investment decisions, the people in the top hats. And dear students, if they are doing it correctly, if they're doing a good job of actively managing your mutual fund, it does cost. Investing is global nowadays, or at least it should be, in my humble opinion. And so to have a global investment organization, it costs. So be prepared to pay anywhere from 0.25% to 2%. That means for every $100, if you're paying 0.25%, they are taking 25 cents. And you've seen it, you can see it as high as 2% or $2 for every $100, which is definitely on the high side. And we'll see some examples of this soon enough, so relax. The 12B1 fees, that's a dumb name. Well, that comes from the Investment Company Act of 1940 in Section 12B1 that mutual funds must show the fees to defray advertising, servicing, and distribution costs of the fund, and they're usually less than 0.25%, sometimes upwards of 1% a year, $1 a year. Does Coca-Cola or does Toyota or GM, do they tell you how much they're paying for advertising and servicing, and which means how much you're paying when you buy their products? Do banks and life insurance companies show you how much they're charging for advertising? No, because they don't have to. But mutual funds do. Mutual funds must show you these 12B1 fees. And then the accounting and other expenses, that's the catch-all phrase. The rent, the website, the janitor services, and the accounting, of course. So it's the catch-all phrase that everything else goes into, and that's usually pretty low. Now we have a little line here, and there's a reason why. And that's because if you have a retirement account or an educational savings account, there's a trustee fee, which is usually about $10 per year, not per month. And upwards, I've seen it as high as $30, $35. That is only if you have what the IRS calls tax qualified account. And there's a reason for that, legal reason, because in reality, you're not actually holding onto the funds. Somebody else is for the benefit of you. Don't worry, they're not going to run away with it. And they need to be paid for their job. And it typically is $10 a year, typically. Okay, so every mutual fund will have these annual operating expenses. And if you have a retirement account, you pay an extra $10 a year or whatever. Now, what is a cost that is not disclosed in the annual prospectus? And that is oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, all those costs that we saw are disclosed in the annual prospectus. And we'll take a look at one maybe today, maybe later on. But that's what part of your assignment is going to be, to slog through, there's that word again, a prospectus. And they are written in such a way that they are very, very useful, folks. If you ever have insomnia at night, pick up a prospectus and start reading it, and it will quickly put you to sleep. But the trading costs are not disclosed in the annual prospectus. So how do you know how much you're getting charged? Well, you can always ask the mutual fund, but really all you have to do is look at the annual turnover. The higher the turnover, meaning how often does the mutual fund turn over its portfolio of securities, stocks, bonds, short-term investments, how often does it turn it over? And the higher the turnover, the higher the trading costs. So, for example, if you had a mutual fund that 100% turnover, that means they're going to have an entire new crop of investments every year. On average, some might be less in a year, some might be more. A 50% turnover means 2 years, half of it in a year. 25% means 4 years. 200% means 6 months. And so what we're looking for long-term investments, and it depends on who you are, but anywhere from 20 to 30% turnover means that they're holding on to the stocks for maybe 3, 4, 5 years. You'll see some mutual funds with 300% or 400% turnover. Now, if they're stock mutual funds, that means they're not investing, they're trading, they're speculating. They're holding on to the stock for 3 months, that's not owning a stock, that's renting a stock. But if it's a money market mutual fund, do you remember the money market mutual funds from our previous presentation? How long do they hold on to a security? Not long, because they mature in 60 days or 90 days or 180 days. So it's very easy for a money market mutual fund to have an outrageous turnover. And we'll discuss turnover when we get into valuation and we start peeling away the onion of how we actually decide what's the value of a security, what's the value of a stock, what's the value of a bond. Okay? But we're going to ask you to look up in this chapter, look up the turnover for the funds that you're going to research. And it's readily available. Now, some funds on slide 23 are going to have a sales load, a sales charge, a sales commission. They go by those, they all mean the same thing. Load, commission, charge. It's a commission that is paid when you purchase the shares. Anywhere from, I've seen it as low now as 2.5% up to 5%. And this was, and still is, used to compensate the financial representative, along with the fund distributor. So the fund distributor, the people who, remember, the mutual fund is made up of various parts, and the distributor's job is to distribute the funds, to get them out there, sell them, basically. So they get a little bit of money, and the financial representative gets a little bit of money. They were originally the only types of funds that were available, but then as competition heats up, mutual fund companies came out and said, we're going to bypass these brokers, these representatives. We're going to sell directly to the shareholders and sell no-load funds. And it's a debate that goes on forever. Should you purchase a load fund or should you purchase a no-load fund? Well, obviously, if you believe that you need the services of a financial professional, then you're going to have to pay for it one way or the other. What has happened is sales charges, sales commission, sales loads have become very unpopular. And the industry is not stupid, so they said, oh, no problem. Yeah, stick with us and you'll see how investors are being charged for their investment services. Yes, you will. So, what we need you to do now is get out a piece of paper or on your cell phone, however you study, because we're going to hold you to these. We're going to ask you to study, internalize these, and know these share classes, the different ways in which mutual fund investors are charged for their mutual funds. The traditional way was with a front-end load, a front-end sales commission, a front-end sales charge. They all mean the same thing. The commission is paid when the shares are purchased, and they normally have lower annual operating expenses. And these are typically called Class A shares, although some companies call them Class 1 shares. But essentially, if you buy a mutual fund that are Class A shares, you're going to be paying an upfront fee, 3%, 5%, whatever. And people don't normally want to pay that upfront fee, so the industry's not stupid. They say, oh, no problem. We have for you the back-end load, Class B shares. The commission is paid when the shares are redeemed. Well, people aren't stupid, and they say, well, that doesn't make any sense. What difference does it make if I pay it up front or back or in the back end? They say, oh, no, relax. Class B shares for back-end load have what's called a contingent deferred sales charge. Isn't that a great name? Contingent. Say contingent. It feels good in your throat when you say contingent. It's kind of like when you say lumpia. It just feels good at the bottom of your throat. Remember, CDSC, contingent deferred sales charge. And what that means is, look, if you sell your shares in the first year, we're going to charge you 5% for selling them with 1 year. In the second year, we'll charge you 4%. And then the third year, 3%. Fourth year, 1%. Fourth year, 2%. Fifth year, 1%. And then after 5 years, you don't pay any sales charge. Well, this is an incentive to hang on to your mutual funds, which is what you should do, folks. Mutual funds are long-term investments, typically, unless it's a money market mutual fund. That's a dedicated short-term investment. But stock and bond mutual funds are considered long-term investments, so you really shouldn't be selling it in 6 months or a year or 2 years. You need to hold on to them. So that incentivizes you so that you don't have to pay the contingent deferred sales charge. Well, how's everybody's getting paid, right? How are people getting paid? Because you got to pay the financial representative somehow. What back-end Class B shares have is a higher annual operating expense, typically through the 12B1 fees, and that will pay for the commission, essentially. And so you'll have higher annual operating expenses until the contingent deferred sales charge disappears, and then they will revert to the A shares and have the lower annual operating expenses. Are you confused yet? Good, we've done our job. Yes, it is confusing, and when we get to the examples, I hope it'll make more sense. But so far, what we have are Class A shares. You pay an upfront fee, you get lower annual operating expenses. Class B shares, you pay a back-end fee, assuming you don't hold on to the shares long enough, 5 years, 6 years. But you pay higher annual operating expenses through the 12B1 fees. And then once you've done that, once they then, after 6 years or whatever, you get, or 4 years, depending on the company, you get the lower annual operating expenses. So you say to your broker, I don't want to pay the upfront fee. I don't want to pay the back-end fee. No problem, because the industry always wants to say, no problem, have a seat, sit down, relax. What we have for you is the Class C shares. They have no front end or back end commission. Well, we're going to hit you with a 1% commission if you redeem the shares within 1 year, but you really shouldn't be doing that anyway. You shouldn't be buying a mutual fund with the idea of selling it within a year, unless it's a money market mutual fund, which is totally different, and they don't have all these money market mutual funds usually never have these commissions, never have these back end fees. So that's because they're like a checking account. But stock and bond funds, yes. However, many Class C shares have higher annual operating expenses in perpetuity. Like that, I love that word, in perpetuity. You get to spit on your friends when you say it. Perpetuity. Or for a long time, some 10 years. Yeah, and then you have lower annual operating expenses. And how do they charge you the higher annual operating expenses? Through the 12B1 fees. So hence, these Class C shares with no upfront fee, no back-end fee, providing you don't sell the shares within a year, wind up costing you more than the Class A or Class B shares. And to make matters worse, brokers used to call them broker no-load funds because they didn't have an upfront fee, they didn't have a back-end fee, but they did have those higher annual operating expenses, and the Securities and Exchange Commission said, no more of this. If the fund has higher fees via the 12B1 fee than 0.25%, you are not allowed to call it a no-load fund. Because what you've done, Mr. Broker, Ms. Broker, is you've basically amortized, which is a fancy word for meaning stretched out. You've stretched out the commission over 10 years or whatever. So it's still a commission-based fund as far as the Securities and Exchange Commission believes. And we brokers do what we're told to do by the SEC, or we lose our license. And so we don't want an upfront fee, so no Class A shares. We don't want a back-end fee, no Class B shares. We don't want higher annual operating expenses, Mr. Broker, Ms. Broker. And what does the brokerage firm say? No problem. I think you're getting the picture how it works, right? Slide number 26. Advisor no-load funds, sometimes called Class F for financial advisor, sometimes called an I for investment advisor, sometimes FI, financial investment advisor, or just sometimes called advisor shares. These clean shares, as they're sometimes called, are held in an advisor's wrap account. The management account, wealth management account, it's called assets under management. The mutual fund doesn't charge an upfront fee, doesn't charge a back-end fee, charges you lower annual operating expenses, but the brokerage firm adds 1%, as high as 2% on top of everything every year to manage the account. Interesting. Would you rather pay 5% upfront or 1% for 30 years? I don't know. We'll see. We'll actually check and see how much it's going to cost us to buy the A shares with the upfront fee versus the F shares with the annual assets under management fee over the long term. I think you can guess which one's going to be more expensive, right? Yeah, I think so. Well, but just stick with this. And then the last category are what the financial media calls true no-load funds. There's no real legal term, but in other words, they're saying, look, these mutual funds deal directly with the public, no upfront fee, no back-end fee, lower annual operating expenses, no wealth management account. You are your own financial advisor. You may not have a 12B1 fee greater than 0.25%, 25 cents for every $100. And they're the darlings of the popular media. Bypass the middleman. Who needs a financial advisor? Just buy my book or sign up for my website. I'm sorry. You might be getting the feeling that I don't really agree with these people. And it's not that I don't agree with them at all. After this semester, if you stick with us the whole semester, you will know whether or not you can be your own financial advisor. Why? Because, as Mr. Warren Buffett says, investing is simple, but it ain't easy. And there are studies that have shown that a lot of people do better with a financial advisor, paying the financial advisor. And however they do, because the financial advisor becomes their their advisor, becomes their guide. And especially, see, as a financial advisor, I really believe I make my money when the market goes down, because I can help people understand that this is typical. This is something that we know is going to happen. We've been here before. We've always recovered. And if we don't recover, it doesn't really matter where your money is. We'll all be digging for beetle grubs and boiling bark for dinner. So these true no-load funds are there for you once you've decided, yes, I'm going to buy my own funds. I'm not going to have a financial advisor. And some have done very, very well, and others have not done so very, very well, because that's why there's chocolate and vanilla, and some people like strawberry. We're going to see some examples of some very good mutual funds. We're going to see an example of not so good mutual fund. And that's where judgment comes in. And we have to be careful, because some no-load funds, no upfront fee, no back-end fee, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to cost us less over the long term, because some load funds have lower annual operating expenses. And so over the long term, the load fund can wind up costing us less than the no load fund. We must look at those annual operating expenses. So hopefully you're not too confused. We have all these share classes that we have to work with, A, B, C, F, and then true no load funds. And so now let's take a look at some examples, some real life examples. This is the AB. Now, they didn't ask me, but I think it's a really dumb name for a company. It used to be Alliance. Alliance is a great company, folks. Don't get me wrong. They've got some awesome mutual funds. And as we said in the previous presentation, remember, Alliance was one of the companies that was tarred with that black brush. They were tarred with the brush with regard to the financial shenanigans that were going on in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. And it was only two people. And only two people in the company were doing it. But it almost destroyed the company. And what they did is they merged with a company called Bernstein. So they were called Alliance Bernstein. And I guess that was too hard for people to spell, because is it S-T-E-I-N or S-T-I-E-N or whatever. And so they changed their name to AB. I think they could have come up with a better name, but that doesn't matter. They still have very good funds. And this is one of their best funds. It's called the AB Large Cap Growth Fund. Again, used to be called the Alliance Large Cap Growth Fund. And notice that they have the Class A shares. They closed the Class B shares, meaning they're getting rid of them. And most all companies now are getting rid of their B shares. And they have the Class C shares. And then instead of the Class F shares or FI, they have what they call the advisor class. But it's the same idea. They used to be called Class F, but now they call them advisor class. So what does the Alliance, AB, I still call the company Alliance, Large Cap Growth Fund. What do they charge you on an upfront fee on their Class A shares? 4.25%. That means for every $100 you put in, you pay $4.25 as a commission. That goes to your financial advisor. Most of it, some of it goes to Alliance. If you have $1,000, that's $42.50. If you have $10,000, that's $425. If you have $100,000, that's no. What happens is once you hit certain sales charge breakpoints, the percentage goes down. When you hit $25,000, when you hit $50,000, when you hit $100,000, the percentage goes down until finally, once you've invested or your account has gone up to $1 million, you don't pay any commission. Do you think the industry loves rich people? Yes, they do. Yes, they do. They really do love very wealthy individuals and do their best to attract their business. So let's just say we're working grunts. We're going to put $100 in. We're going to pay $4.25 for the upfront Class A shares. And then what are the management fees? Well, what are the annual operating expenses, of which there are three categories, as we said: management fees, 12B1 fees, distribution, service, advertising fees, and the other expenses. Well, it turns out that Alliance charges 48 cents, 0.48%, 48 cents for every $100 you have in the account. So that means we're going to pay 48 cents every year to the people in the top hats who are going on knocking on the doors and deciding to buy Home Depot or Walmart or Costco. There's the 12B1 fees, the 25 cents to service, distribute, market, advertise the fund. And then the accounting and other expenses are 11 cents. So for every $100, you're paying 84 cents a year. Now, does that sound like a lot of money? Well, it's about average for actively managed funds, and it's a hell of a lot less than your bank or your life insurance company charges you for every $100 you put in the account. But you never know that, do you? Because they're not required to show you. They're not under the aegis of the Investment Company Act of 1940, which is telling the mutual fund companies that they must show you how much they charge for distribution and service fees. So 84 cents. Now, what happens when we go to the Class B shares? We don't want that upfront fee, Ms. Broker. No problem. For you, we used to have them. They're gone now, but they would charge you no upfront fee. Cool. Notice it says maximum sales charge. That's because it goes down as the amount goes up. What's the maximum deferred sales charge, that contingent deferred sales charge? Well, Alliance when they had the Class B shares, they would charge you 4% for the first year, 3% for the second year, 2% for the third year, and 1% for the fourth year. And then after the fourth year, you didn't pay any sales charge. So that was the maximum. If you redeem the shares within 1 year, but you don't want to do that because they're long-term investments. You want to let the mutual fund do its job and give it time. So notice that the management fees are the same in the Class B shares. They're the same across the board. But what happened with the 12B1 fees? 1%. You see, it went from 25 cents up to $1. And as I remember, the Class B shares for Alliance were 6 years. After 6 years, then they went to the Class A shares, and you got the lower annual operating expenses. But notice the other expenses are higher at 16 cents. So it cost you $1.64 for every $100 you have in the account. Do you want to pay me now, or do you want to pay me later? Well, you go to your broker and you say, well, Mr. Broker, I don't want an upfront fee. I don't want a back-end fee. No problem. We have for you the Class C shares. In fact, they're the broker. Nope, I'm not allowed to say that anymore. They're the Class C shares. No upfront fee. Well, we're going to charge you 1% if you take the money out within a year. But you're not going to do that, Mr. and Mrs. John Q. Investor. You don't want to be a short-term oriented investor. No, Mr. Broker. We're in for the long term. So you're never going to pay that 1%. But you do pay the management fees. Well, everybody pays those. And then there's that 12B1 fee. $1 for every $100 you have in the account. The other expenses are lower, so you pay $1.59. And as I remember, that was for 10 years with the Class C shares for Alliance. I got to go back and look that up. But yeah, so $1.59. So you go to your broker, Ms. Broker, I don't want to pay an upfront fee, no Class A shares. I don't want to pay a back-end fee, no Class B shares. And I want lower annual operating expenses, no Class C shares. And she says, no problem. For you, we have the advisor class. We're not your brokers. Oh, no. We're your wealth managers. We will show you shares that have no upfront fee, no back-end fee, lowest annual operating expenses. Look, no 12B1 fees. 48 cents for every $100 you have in the account. Well, that's the same for all the other share classes. And the other expenses are 11 cents. So you pay 59 cents for every $100 you have in the account. Oh, by the way, we add an extra 1% or 2% every year. What was that, Miss Broker? What did you say? Well, we have a wealth management fee of an extra, just 1%, 1.25%. But we'll send you a bottle of wine on your birthday and take you to the golf course, and that'll make everything wonderful. Yeah. You can get in the feeling that I'm not too excited about these Class F shares, these advisor class shares. No, I'm not, and we'll relate to you a little story later on. So that was the Alliance, I'm sorry, AB, Large Cap Growth Fund. A very good fund, by the way. Here's another excellent fund that has been around for decades, and it's called the Growth Fund of America. And as you would expect, this company is buying growth companies. This mutual fund company is looking into growth stocks, and that's what they do. They're the Growth Fund of America. Now, notice, that the Class A shares have a higher sales charge, a higher maximum sales charge. Again, once you hit 25,000, it goes down 50,000, 100,000. We'll see the breakpoint schedule later on today in this presentation. But notice that their management fees are almost half of what the Alliance Fund was. And their 12B1 fees, well, they're about basically the same. The other expenses are about basically the same. So they're only charging 61 cents for every $100 you have in the account. And like Alliance, like AB, they have gotten rid of their B shares. But it was the same idea. They started at 5%, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then after 6 years, you didn't pay any sales back-end fee. But they, just like Alliance, charged 1%, $1 for their Class B shares 12B1 fees. And I think, as I remember, with American funds, it was 8 years. With Growth Fund of America, it was 8 years that you had the Class B shares, and then they became the Class A shares. And notice that the other expenses were higher, so you paid $1.41 for 8 years, and then after 8 years, you got to pay the 61 cents that the Class A shares charge. And why is that? It's because you've basically paid the commission by paying the higher distribution fees, the higher 12B1 fees for 8 years, and they say, okay, so now we'll give you the Class A shares. And the same thing is true for the Class C shares, as was true with AB, Large Cap Growth Fund. No upfront fee, 1% if you take the money out within a year, but you're not going to do that. Please don't. Unless somebody tells you, oh my goodness, do you go with that company? Do you realize that they've been caught cheating and stealing and everything? But literally, if you buy a mutual fund after you've done all your research and you're going to take this class and you're going to learn that there are many good choices, you want to let it go. You want to let it do its thing. And so you don't pay the 1% penalty for taking it out within a year, but you do pay an extra 1% then over the, well, actually, instead of 24 cents, $1 every year. And this one, I'm sure, is 10 years. This one is 10 years. So $1.37 for 10 years. And then finally, the fees go down. So you go to your broker, I don't want an upfront fee, I don't want a back-end fee, I want lower annual operating expenses, and they say, no problem, for you we have the Class F shares. Now American has 3, F1, F2, F3. F3 are the cheapest, the most advantageous to the investor. Notice, no upfront fee, no back-end fee, 30 cents. Wow, that's lower than anything we've seen so far. 30 cents a year. But what we're not seeing is the advisor's wealth management fee, assets under management fee, 1% to 2% on top of this 30 cents. So instead of 30 cents, it's probably $1.30 or $2.30. Yeah, but you send them a bottle of wine on. Why do I say this? Well, I was at I'm telling you before I normally would tell you, so I got a bug in my ear. I want to tell you now. About 10, 12 years ago, there was still an argument about how we should charge investors, Class A versus C versus F, and the B shares were already on their way out. And I was at a conference somewhere, I forget where now, but we were all wearing our suits and all professional. And we got on the subject, and I basically said, I don't think that the advisor, the Class F shares, the assets under management fee is in the best interest of the clients. Over the long term, if they're long-term oriented investors, they're going to spend a hell of a lot more money in fees than if they just paid the upfront commission. And this guy in this, I swear, his suit was at least, it was $1,000. That's a good deal. And his hair was perfect, and he exuded the image. And he said, "What are you worried about? You send them a bottle of wine on their birthday, you take them to the steakhouse, take them golfing, they'll love you." I'm not usually at a loss for words, dear students, but I certainly it just stopped me cold, because I wasn't going to argue with the guy. I was going to say, well, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, what's in the best interest of the clients. And obviously for him, that was what's in the best interest of the clients. How you make them feel. Whether or not you're soaking them for extra money, well, that's something, and that's what you're up against. We're not always lined up on the same side when it comes to the industry. But that doesn't mean there are some dishonest people, but that doesn't mean all people are dishonest. It's just that the system is incentivized to charge people more than they should, in my humble opinion. But that's my opinion. There's lots of other people who will say Payano doesn't know what he's talking about. He's one of those academic professor types. So you'll hear it from both sides eventually. Now, here is another company, the Legg Mason Value Trust, which is actually no longer called the Legg Mason Value Trust. It's now called the ClearBridge Value Trust. Why did they change their name? You'll see why later. They never had the Class A shares till about 10, 12 years ago. And then they had the Class C shares, which they called the primary class. They had the FI shares, Financial Investment Advisor, FI, and then they had these institutional shares. So the Class A shares are similar to the Growth Fund of America, 5.75%. But notice that their annual operating expenses, 1.07, was higher. So they charge you the same upfront fee, but their annual operating expenses are higher. They never had the Class B shares. But they do have the C shares, and that's actually their oldest one, the C shares. They charge you 0.95% if you took the money out within a year, but you're not going to do that. And then they charge you that 0.95%, not quite $1, but almost $1, for the distribution and or service fees. So $1.77. Sure, you can go with the FI shares, no upfront fee, no back-end fee, lower 12B1 fees, $1.17. But remember, your financial advisor is going to tack 1%, so $2.17, or instead of $1.17. And then these institutional, these look like the best deal, but do you have to be institutionalized to get them? Do you have to be in an institute? No, that's for pension funds and other nonprofit organizations and trusts and the like. So we don't have access to the institutional funds. So those three funds worked very similarly, with A, B, B shares being gone, C shares, and the F or FI shares. Now for something completely different. I'm a big fan of Monty Python. The Vanguard 500 Index Admiral shares. The investor shares are been phased out, and everybody gets the Admiral shares now. This is an index fund. This fund does no research. Remember the people in the top hats? They ain't here. They're not here. This company simply buys all the 500 stocks in the Standard & Poor's 500 index. And we'll discuss this index in detail in our next chapter. So it's one of the problems of teaching mutual funds, putting mutual funds before stocks. Because what is the S&P 500 index? It's just a list of 500 companies. That's all it is. And the term for this is passive management. And we'll discuss the eternal debate now, the big controversy over active versus passive management. Index funds are usually true no-load funds, and usually, but not always, have very low fees. The previous version of this fund, which they are phasing out, had expenses of 14 cents. So this guy, no upfront fee, no back-end fee, management fees of only 4 cents, and no distribution and or service fees unless you have under $10,000 or you sign up. If you have under $10,000, if you sign up for electronic delivery, they waive the $20 annual fee. And look, other expenses, well, it's not actually zero, but it does because it's such a small amount, it doesn't even show up. It shows up as 0.00. So 4 cents. 4 cents. Well, they better not be charging anymore. They're not doing any research. They're not sending people all around the globe to look at the companies that they could be investing in, because all they do is look up a list of companies, and if it's on the list, they buy it, and if it's not on the list, they don't buy it. You and I could run this fund. It's that simple. And we have to be careful, because there are some index funds that are not very inexpensive. And where are they? They're in your 401k. Thank the insurance company for that. Oh, the big jerks. So, Vanguard, you've probably heard of them. They're the largest mutual fund company, and they have become very, very popular because of their low-cost index funds. So what happened? Fidelity, which used to be the largest mutual fund company, saw Vanguard overtake them, and if you can't beat them, join them. So they created their own index funds, and notice they decided, oh yeah, instead of 4 cents, we'll charge you a penny and a half. And as we said, Vanguard has made a few of their index funds, I think 3, free. It's 0. I don't know, I forget which ones, but there are a couple of index funds, of course, because it doesn't cost them very much money to run the darn things. And again, they recently removed, they used to have a $12 annual fee if your account was below $2,000, but they removed that. So how low can you go? It's kind of like limbo, right? So what do we see? Lower annual operating expenses with index funds because they're not doing any research. And we'll discuss this in detail as we go along. So now, included in the prospectus, prospecti, it's actually prospectuses, are examples of hypothetical investments with a 5% return and how much you'd pay over 1, 3, 5, and 10 years. So here's the large cap growth fund, the AB, the Alliance Growth Fund. And notice, if we put $10,000 away, we had to pay $425 right off the bat. So that makes the A shares much more expensive over the B and the C shares. But notice after 3 years, the B and the C shares, because they're charging you higher annual operating expenses, are catching up. And by 5 years, the B shares are more, and the C shares are about the same. But then look what happens after 10 years. The B and the C shares now charge you more over the long term. And you say, well, Payano, look at this. Although it looks as though the advisor class F shares are the best deal, this does not include the advisor's annual fee. Notice it says, excludes advisor fee. Adding the typical fee of 1 or 2% could easily add an additional $1,300 to $2,600 to the total cost. Over the long term, assuming you need the services of an investment professional, which is the best deal? It's the A shares. And by the way, guess which shares are the most popular with brokerage firms these days? It's the advisor class, the F shares. They send you a bottle of wine on your birthday and take you to the golf course, and you'll love them. Here, yeah, I'm not cynical. Okay, here's the Legg Mason Value Trust. Again, the Class C shares wind up costing you more than the Class A shares. The financial advisor intermediary class, the FI shares, seem to be a better deal, but again, it excludes the advisor's annual fee of $1,300 to $2,600. The institutional class looks great. How do you get them? Well, for starters, are you a large pension fund, a university endowment, and a tax-exempt charity? Oh, by the way, do you have at least $1 million to invest with us? Get out of here. So you see, if we have a long-term perspective, that's number one, and we believe we need the services of a financial advisor, the Class A shares turn out to be the best deal over the long term. Now, you'll probably find a few examples where that's not the case, but if you're in it for the long term, And you're not going to, if you're going to be moving stuff around every year, yeah, stay away from the Class A shares because the commissions will kill you. And it'll be better to pay the 1% every year. You're going to wind up spending a whole lot anyway by moving your stuff back and forth. You might as well pay the upfront, not pay the upfront, pay the annual advisor fee of 1% to 2%, 1% being better. And I've seen the commissions, the competition is getting stiff. I've seen it less than 1% now. I saw 0.87. I saw like something like that. So the competition is getting stiff. So shop around if you do want to pay the annual operating expense. The annual assets under management fee. But don't do it. Don't do it. You do it. It's your money. So notice now the index fund. Look at that. Look how much cheaper the index fund is compared to the actively managed funds. Now let's read carefully. Now notice the investor class, as I said, is being phased out. It's the Admiral class now. It used to be you had to have $100,000 to get the Admiral class. Now you can get them with a minimum of only $3,000. The fees for passively managed index funds will almost always be less than actively managed funds. Look, there's a little star there. Let's go down here. Careful. Some 401k plans, 403b plans, will have high fee index funds snuck into them. Huh? Why would they do that? Because they can. And who would do that to their employees? Southwestern College, for one. And they didn't really know what they were doing. I'm talking about the people who were, in charge of going with the insurance company that basically ran our 403b. And I'm jumping up and down, because this is me saying, do you realize that these index funds are a lot more expensive than what we should be paying? And they're going, no. The folks in human resources go, what are you talking about? Finally, somebody in human resources took my class, and she said, Frank, they're ripping us off. I said, I told you so. So it was kind of cute, right? And the first meeting that we had with these people, the new group, they didn't realize that Yo Boy was in the audience, and I'm saying, "What is this? What?" And the guy's going, yeah. And that's going to be you. That's going to be you. You're going to be in the 401k meeting, whatever the employer-sponsored plan meeting, and there's going to be some jerk up there with a 3-piece suit and a gold watch, and he's going to be telling you, or she's going to be telling you how wonderful this plan is, and you're going to be looking at these index funds, and you're going to be saying, wait a minute, how come we're not going with Vanguard or Fidelity and paying 4 cents instead of paying 60 cents for every $100? Because that's what they do. It's pure profit for the insurance company. And that jerk is going to just start going, and then all your friends and all your compadres, your colleagues are going to turn around and look at you and say, what a genius. Where did you learn all this? And you're going to say, BUS123, Introduction to Invest. See, I wash your back, you wash my back. And you're welcome, by the way. Okay, so you're going to be the genius. You're going to be the investment guru for your friends and family. And I'm so proud of you already. And you haven't even done it yet. But study hard and bring honor and glory to your friends, family, coworkers, yourself, and Southwestern Community College. Okay, enough of that. All right, so index funds are cheaper. Yes. Now, here's the sales charge breakpoint we talked about. Remember we said that you paid 5.75% for the Growth Fund of America, but that was only up to $25,000. Either you purchase or accumulate in your account $25,000, and then it goes down to 5%. Once you hit $50,000, 4.5%, $100,000, 3.5%, 2.5% at $250,000, $500,000, 2%, $750,000, 1.5%, and then finally, when you get $1 million in your account, or you have $1 million to invest, and everybody has that, right? They love rich people. You pay no commission. Class A shares qualify for a sales reduction if you invest a larger amount or your investment grows. Now, when I first heard this, I could not believe it. But then I thought, of course, some brokers are schmucks, just like some teachers are schmucks, sometimes like some cops are schmucks, sometimes doctors are jerks. There's jerks everywhere. Some brokers fail to inform their clients of this feature. Instead, as the client approached the break point, the broker would advise them to start another fund with a different company. If you do that now, you can lose your license and be fined and be required to pay back the money to the investor that you stole money from. Big jerks. And I have never met anybody who's done this, but that doesn't mean that there aren't out there. So be careful. Get a good referral and keep your back to the wall. And here's the contingent deferred sales charge we talked about. We already mentioned this. The AB shares, which are gone now. Start off the first year, you take the money out, they're going to charge you 4%. 2 years, 3%, 3 years, 2%, and after 4 years, 1%, and after 5 years, you will not pay any back-end contingent deferred sales charge. By the way, annuities from life insurance companies have the same type of what they don't call it the contingent deferred sales charge. They call it a surrender charge. They start at 20% or 25%. It takes them 20 years to get down to zero. I'm not a big fan of life. Remember, I'm an insurance agent, so I can say true things about brokers and insurance agents. Yeah, no, annuities are even worse. So, oh my goodness. Are you tired? I know it doesn't happen in one sitting. Somebody not the face-to-face, but the online class, the live class said, how many times do we have to watch the presentations? And I said, usually once, but some of them you're going to have to listen to them a few times because they can get pretty involved. And that's the case here. So here we have the 4 different funds that we looked at. The Large Cap Growth Fund from AllianceBernstein, the Growth Fund of America, Legg Mason Value Trust, and the Index 500 Vanguard Fund. And compare that to the Standard & Poor's 500 Index over the last 10 years. Now we know that the Class A shares are the best deal. The Legg Mason Value Trust didn't have them until about 10 years ago, so I guess we should change to Class A maybe next time, but they only had the Class C shares. And of course, we're going to use the Admiral shares, even though they weren't available to most people with $10,000, but we're going to use the Admiral shares anyway. So which one would you pick, huh? Would you pick the Large Cap Growth Fund from AllianceBernstein, the Growth Fund of America, the Legg Mason Value Trust, or the Vanguard Index 500? In the face-to-face class, we have these A, B, C, D. You saw them in the previous chapter. Cards that people hold up, so I can't see you. And of course, if you printed this out, you can't see it. But we're going to see it now. Ta-da! Bingo! The last 10 years were pretty darn good 10 years. Fees are important, but they certainly don't tell the whole story. When comparing mutual funds, you must look at many attributes, not the least of which are the rates of return, preferably over long time periods. What was unusual about the last 10 years? The last 10 years have been growth. So companies that are dedicated to growth, like the Large Cap Growth Fund, the Growth Fund of America, have done very well. And the Standard & Poor's 500 Index has done very well, 16%. My goodness, that's not going to last, dear students. Remember, the average over the many years is about 10, 11%, and sometimes it's been a lot less. So we're riding the wave. And notice that if you paid the upfront, even after paying the upfront fee for the Large Cap Growth Fund, for the Growth Fund of America, you did pretty darn well. Now, what about the Legg Mason Value Trust? Well, as we said, it's a very infamous fund. Why? Because it used to just destroy everybody else. It was the best fund for just unbelievable. They did so well until they didn't. And we'll discuss Mr. Bill Miller, who's no longer with the fund. He's been not with the fund for many years now, but they're still lagging after he stunk up the joint for a few years during the great, right before and during the Great Recession. So with an actively managed fund, we can do better than the indices, especially if we choose a fund for which the investment style is in vogue, in this case, growth. If we had looked at value funds, and we'll discuss those later on, we would see that they have underperformed the Standard & Poor's 500 Index. If we choose a fund that does poorly or has done poorly in the past, we can underperform the market quite a bit. And if we choose an index fund, we're going to basically get what the market gives us. Now, notice it's a little bit less. Well, that's because they were charging us 4% a year. So big deal, 0.51 versus 0.55. It's very close to one another, $100 or so. Fees are important, but they certainly don't tell you the whole story. We just said this already. When comparing mutual funds, you must look at many attributes, not the least of which are the rates of return, preferably over long time periods. What is unusual about the last 10 years? Growth, 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 growth. But notice, if you had gotten the net asset value, the no sales charge on the large cap growth fund or the growth fund of America, you would have done even better. Look at how well that large cap growth fund. You see, Alliance, as I said, Alliance almost disappeared. And that would have been really, really sad because look at this fund. It's a very good fund. And if you had $1 million, right, didn't pay any sales charge, you would have actually done even better, 20.77%. That's not going to continue. I don't know, maybe it will, but I don't think it will. History tells us that after decades like this, it's usually more muted. But we'll see. That's why it's called the future. Okay, so now it's time for checking for comprehension. Again, I warned you, we want you to know these different share classes. So go back over, study and study, study. These shares do not have an upfront sales charge. Instead, they assess a decreasing back-end load if you withdraw your money within 6 years. The annual operating expense is higher, courtesy of the 12B1 fees. Are they the A, B, C, F, or I shares? They're the B shares, back-end load. They normally, eventually, become the A shares after 6, 8 years, and they're disappearing. Very few mutual fund companies still have these anymore. These shares, slide 39, do not have an upfront fee and only a 1% back-end fee if redeemed within 1 year. The advisor called them NoLoad. But you notice that the annual operating expense is higher than the other share classes. No upfront fee, 1% fee if you take the money out with a year, which you're not going to do, and higher annual operating expenses, ubiquitous 12B1 fees, A, B, C, F, or I, the C shares. And they sometimes revert to the A shares or the F shares after many years, and then you don't have to pay the higher annual operating expenses. And then lastly, your financial advisor tells you that these shares have no sales fee and a very low annual operating expense. She mumbles something about wealth management. These shares are the A, B, C, F, or I shares. These are the F shares, the I shares, the advisor shares, the assets under management shares. They go by various names. She also did her best not to explain to you that her brokerage firm is going to charge you an extra 2% each year. Yeah, I'll tell you a little story. An individual who was looking at a certain financial advisor was told that she was going to be charged 2% a year. And I tried to explain to her, was a colleague, that's a lot of money. That's a lot. But they were from her church. And so they were kindred spirits, Christians. Oh, folks, whenever you mix religion with money, it's a bad thing. This is Caesar, right? Render under Caesar that which is Caesar. Render under God that which is God. This is Caesar. And sure enough, I explained to her, you should be able to do a whole lot better than that. If you really believe you want to go with these people, just talk to them. They should lower it. She mentioned that I explained to her that 2% was high, and boom, immediately they said, oh, we'll charge you 1%. Yeah, okay. Oh, by the way, there are dozens of other share classes depending on the mutual fund company. And you're going to see this when you open up the prospectus. But don't worry. All of them are variations on these themes that we discussed today. Upfront fee, back-end fee, higher annual operating expenses through the Class C shares or the Class F shares, and then the true no-load funds. So here you are, folks. Mutual fund fees in under an hour. I know it. You're going to have to study it hard, but you're going to be the investment guru, and you have to know this. You can't let your friends and family and coworkers down because it's going to get even worse. In our next presentation, we're going to try to do the impossible, and that's get our arms around this industry. Get our arms around this 800-pound marshmallow that's sitting in the middle of the room. Wish us luck. See you in our next presentation when we discuss the different types of mutual funds, from the riskiest to the least riskiest. Thank you so much for being in our class, folks. We, all of us at Southwestern, are very proud and honored and happy that you're here with us.